A production possibility frontier, PPF, is a graphical representation of the maximum possible combinations of two goods an economy can produce with its limited resources and technology at a given time. Each axis represents a product. In this case, the x-axis is cheese and the y-axis is biscuits. When the production of biscuits is high, the production of cheese is low, due to how resources are being distributed. But when the production of cheese is high, the production of biscuits is low. In simpler terms, the production possibility frontier lets you see the maximum combinations of goods that can be produced when resources are being used efficiently. How does the graph work? Points on the curve. Any point lying directly on the PPF curve represents maximum efficiency. All resources are fully employed and no output can be increased without decreasing another. Points inside the curve. Resources are underemployed, misallocated, or there's technological inefficiency. The economy could produce more of both goods. Points outside the curve. Any combination lying outside the PPF curve is beyond current productive capacity. Opportunity cost using marginal analysis. The PPF slope at any given point represents the marginal rate of transformation, the opportunity cost of producing one additional unit of a good in terms of the other good foregone. In simpler terms, this means how much of one good are you losing to produce more of another. How to calculate marginal opportunity cost. 1. Identify your two goods on the PPF graph. For example, goods A and goods B. 2. Choose 2 points on the PPF curve to represent different production levels. 3. Calculate the change in quantity of good B, the good you're giving up for each step. 4. Calculate the change in the quantity of good A, the good you're gaining. 5. Divide the change in good B by the change in good A to represent the marginal opportunity cost for producing more of good A. Economic growth and decline. Economic growth. Economic growth is represented by an outward shift of the entire PPF curve, indicating increased productive capacity. The economy can now produce more of both goods than previously possible. This is done by investment in capital goods, technological improvements, increased labor force, discovery of new resources, improved education and training. Economic decline. Economic decline is shown through an inward shift of the PPF, reducing the economy's productive potential. This represents a permanent loss of productive capacity. This is done by natural disasters, war, conflict, skilled workers leaving, depletion of natural resources, deteriorating infrastructure, and ineffective distribution of resources. The difference between movement and shifts in PPF and their causes. Movements. A movement occurs when there is any change in the allocation of existing resources within an economy. For example, now more resources are being allocated to produce butter instead of cheese. Shifts. Shifts mean a change in an economy's overall production potential, indicating growth, outward shift, or decline, inward shift. Causes. Changes are usually caused by technological advancement or depletion, resource scarcity or abundance, or improved factors of production or impaired factors of production.
The distinction between capital goods and consumer goods. The definition of capital goods are man-made resources used in the production of other goods and services. They do not directly satisfy wants but help produce consumer goods and services. Examples of these include machinery, tools, factories, lorries, and computers used in business. On the other hand, consumer goods are goods and services that directly satisfy human wants and needs. They are the end product of production. Examples of these are clothing, food, smartphones, and holidays. Types of consumer goods. Durable consumer goods, long-lasting, cars, laptops, or furniture, for example. Non-durable consumer goods, these are used up quickly, for example, food and drink. And consumer services. These are intangible, consumed at the point of use. For example, haircuts, Netflix, or education. Furthermore, on the distinction between capital goods and consumer goods. There's an economic distinction where capital goods equal inputs into production and consumer goods equal outputs of production. The same object can be either, depending on the use. For example, a van used by a delivery firm equals a capital good, although a van bought by a family for personal use equals a consumer good. So why does this matter in economics? Well, the idea of opportunity cost. If an economy produces more capital goods today, that means that fewer consumer goods now, but potentially higher production of consumer goods in the future. If it produces more consumer goods today, That means that higher living standards now, but slower growth in the future. Lastly, on the distinctions between capital goods and consumer goods. The impacts are prioritizing capital or consumer goods. In the short term, there are more consumer goods, which means higher current living standards. In the long term, there are more capital goods, which means higher future growth and productive capacity. Economies must balance consumption versus investment. Developing economies often need to prioritize consumer goods, which are basic needs, over capital goods. Developed economies may focus more on capital goods for long-term innovation. And then some goods blur the line, for example, computers, vehicles, buildings, though the choice depends on government policy, interest rates, expected demand, etc. The significance of capital goods for productivity and economic growth. Capital goods and productivity. Capital goods are tools, machinery, factories, infrastructure. More or better capital means each worker can produce more output per hour, increasing labor productivity. For example, a farmer with a tractor produces far more than one with only hand tools. Capital deepening is increasing the amount of capital per worker, which boosts efficiency. New technologies in capital goods, for example AI, automation, robotics, also improve quality of output. Capital goods and short versus long-run growth. Short-run growth. If more capital goods are produced, aggregate demand may rise. Investment is a component of AD, but there's an opportunity cost. Fewer consumer goods today means possible fall in living standards in the short term. Long-run growth. Investment in capital goods increases the economy's productive capacity. Outward shift of the PPF, which means production possibility frontier. This means the economy can produce more goods and services in the future. Evaluations and limitations. Diminishing returns. After a point, adding more capital doesn't massively boost productivity unless labor skills improve too. They need human capital. Depreciation. Capital goods wear out. For example, machines break, infrastructure needs repair. Financing. Heavy investment in capital goods may mean higher taxes or borrowing, reducing short-term consumption. Balance needed. Too much focus on capital goods can reduce consumer welfare in the short run. Diagrams to use. PPF diagram. Trade-off between capital goods and consumer goods means more capital now shifts PPF outward in the future. Significance of capital goods for productivity and economic growth. Impact on economic growth. Sustainable growth. Capital goods allow growth without inflationary pressure. Competitiveness. More capital goods means lower costs of production, which means firms can compete globally. Multiplier effect. Investment in capital goods creates jobs in capital goods industries, stimulating wider economic activity. Significance in development. Developing economies often lack sufficient capital goods, which means low productivity traps. Investment in infrastructure and machinery is vital. Developed economies. Growth depends more on the quality of capital, for example, innovation or advanced tech, rather than just quantity.